Today we're going balls deep into Fantasy Basketball International. What is it? Who are we? What do we do? I'm joined by one of the founders, Bdub. Let's play. Welcome to the Balls Deep Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantasy Basketball International. FBIbasketball.com is our website. Head over there for all of our content, leagues, Discord, everything. I'm Adam King, at AdamKing91 on Twitter is where you can find me. As I said, joined by Bdub today. We were I was racking my brain for content, and I just thought this might be a good week to get Bdub on and have a chat about who FBI is, where we fit, a bit of the backstory, what we offer. So for anyone that isn't super familiar with us, this is an opportunity to learn a bit, as I'm sure I will. I will bring Bdub in. Bdub, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very good. 2 more days of work, then I'm on leave. So I'm starting to get into holiday mode. Not quite there, but getting close. And a nice day here. A little bit colder where you are, though.
Yeah. Well, it's been nice the last 4 or 5 days, like strangely nice for this time of year. But we've reverted back to the norm just for today. But I understand that it's going to pick up again for the weekend.
Yeah, I think we're due to go back down tomorrow. So maybe we're getting your cold weather traveling up here tomorrow. So, as I said, we're just going to chat about FBI, and you obviously put it together with Matt Lawson quite a while ago now. We're starting to grow slowly and increase what we do. So, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity for you to talk about the history and the future as well of FBI. So we'll start with the origin story, I suppose. So where did FBI start? Why did it start? And what were your goals initially?
Yeah, well, I wish I had a sort of a more pre-canned response for this, but you're just gonna have to take what my memory spews up. But something that I can say for sure is that we actually didn't conceive of FBI all at once. It sort of happened independently, and then we came together. So Matt, obviously, the dynasty GOAT, right? I think everyone can agree with that. But it was before COVID. Matt had been starting some dynasty leagues, and actually, let me even rewind before that. Josh Lloyd had his own set of dynasty leagues. He must have had 20 or 30 of those, and I was in a couple of those, and Matt was obviously in quite a few of those as well. And then Matt had been starting up some of his own dynasty leagues. And there was a real sort of thing going on. And I believe at the time that the different chat forums for those dynasty leagues were sort of distributed all over the place. So there was, some in GroupMe, some were using, Facebook Messenger, some were relying on Reddit. So it was sort of everywhere, I guess. And a lot of it was actually conducted through the platform. So Fantrax in particular, sending out emails through the way that you do it in Fantrax. So not sort of the best holistic experience for participating in those leagues. And as you can imagine, there was sort of like a lot of crossover from league to league. There might have been 25 Red Rock, as Josh called them at the time, Red Rock Dynasty leagues. I was in like 3 or 4. Matt, I think, was actually in more than that. But then a lot of the diehard fantasy people that have been following Josh for a while and so forth, they might also be in 2 or 3 or 4 of those leagues as well. A lot of crossover, but it wasn't a lot of consolidation or a lot of sort of centralization, which is a problem from a communication perspective. So that was going on. But then sort of what I was doing independently of that was, I guess, I had been participating in various leagues since, I don't know, about 2012 or so. And I had started off just joining free leagues on ESPN because that was the first platform that I sort of came across offering fantasy basketball. But then as you mature as a sort of a fantasy manager, you want to play in more competitive leagues. Like the initial thing you want to do is just win. So a year or two, first year, didn't really know what I was doing, did okay in the league. The next year, I just wanted to win a couple of leagues, and I managed to sort of go on and do that. But it's such a hollow victory when you're playing against randoms off the internet, and then half the people that are playing stop playing after the first couple of weeks, and it ends up being like a crapshoot between you and three other managers, and you end up with a team, like a 13 deep team where they're all, in the top 50 or something like that. Anyway, you venture into sort of the money leagues, and then who's running the money leagues at the time? Yeah, Josh was running a few. They were good. They were run well. But then that's not enough to satiate your appetite. So this bloke over here is offering a cash league. That bloke over there is offering a cash league. And what was kind of like really common across a lot of these random leagues was stuff like rule changes after the draft or midway through the season, right? Arbitrary rule changes. The commissioner just decides this is what's going to happen, and then everything just changes. It's not fair. Another thing would be like, all right, you're doing cash league. You're sending your $20 or whatever to some guy on PayPal. No transparency. After the league finishes, you don't hear from them for 3-4 months. And then you might get your money, you might not. And I'm painting a dire picture. There were plenty of leagues that worked out, plenty of sort of good commissioners floating around. But again, it was just the same thing where, all right, I'm playing in this league. It's on Group Me. I'm playing on that league over there. They've got like, they're doing it by email, like that kind of thing. So the initial drive was just like two things for me. One was I want to have leagues where the rules are consistent and enforced, and they're not changing, and just everything's fair. So how am I going to make sure of that? The only way to do it was to like, all right, I'm going to run the leagues. Right. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing, I'm starting to run a few leagues myself. And the second thing is, well, I want to corral all the people across my leagues into sort of one space. Right. So I don't want to be sort of jumping from platform to platform, posting announcements and answering the same questions multiple times or whatever. And it just so happened that, just like with what I was describing with the dynasty stuff before, there's like a contingent of like, a couple of dozen guys, and they're not in every league, but they might be in 2 or 3 or whatever. So it's sort of like the same community doing the leagues with me. And then on Matt's side, it's sort of the same thing as well. And then the platforms that we're using to host those leagues and do the managed communications, just all over the place. So what I ended up doing, and this is before I sort of, we sort of launched FBI, I launched MFB, which was Melbourne Fantasy Basketball. I wasn't thinking too big at that time. Just wanted to corral our group into one place. Opened up a Slack account and created like a Slack server. And that was sort of revolutionary because the best place to manage comms before then was sort of like Group Me. And, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's like, all right, you've got the capacity to make different channels for different leagues, but there's no sort of capacity to manage it like you would in a Slack or a Discord. So anyway, got all the boys into Slack, and we sort of started managing those leagues through there. And I think the thing that really sort of made that go into overdrive was the draft only league. So I'm a fantasy degenerate. I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say that. I finished the season and I immediately just want to start doing it again. And, and this is kind of before that I really got into Dynasty, right? So now our off season, like especially the first part, it's just chock full of Dynasty stuff, right? Like you got, 6 or 8 Dynasty teams, you're managing all your transactions, your trades, doing your rookie drafts and stuff like that. But before I sort of got balls deep into the Dynasty stuff, it was like, right, draft only leagues. So start running these draft only leagues, very small buy-in. The idea is not to manage the teams all season or anything like that. It's literally just like mock drafts, but with $5 on the line so people take it seriously. And I mean, I can actually rewind to even before that, which was, a year or two before starting MFB, which was, I'd be at work standing in the queue to get my lunch, and I'd be sitting there doing an ESPN mock draft, and then, sometimes you'd get in with a group of, if it was the right time of day, you'd have a competitive one, and that was sort of, quite informative. It'd help you get prepared for your drafts. And I found those couple of seasons where I did a lot of those, I just had better drafts. But by sort of getting people to put $5 in to do it, it's just like the same experience, except every single one of them is a good mock draft. So around the same time, when you started to create a community together, you realize, well, everyone's all over the world. It's very difficult to get everyone, 12 people to sit down in the same place for an hour and do a mock. So we sort of introduced a slow draft concept to these mock drafts. So anyway, MFB was a lot of mock drafting through the off season. And then the leagues that I was running just through the regular season. And I think there's maybe one season of that. And I'm simultaneously getting really deep into Dynasty at that stage. And I ended up just reaching out to Matt and saying, look, you have got this amazing Dynasty community. I've got a fantastic redraft community over here. Our comms channels, my comms channels were all over the place. Yours still are. I've consolidated it into this Slack server. Why don't we sort of combine forces? You be the Dynasty guy. I'll be the redraft guy. We'll just be the guys that become known for having quality leagues with commissioners that you can trust, where there's not rule changes halfway through the season. You just got consistency and fairness as sort of the sort of guiding lights. So that's what we did. We sort of both jumped into that Slack channel. We started attracting more and more people. I'm pretty happy to say that that original core of maybe it was 30 to 50 guys that were participating in my leagues, they're all still highly active in our community, almost to a T, every single one of them. So, I can point to Nurkic Circus, Yog, Hugs. I can point to Simmons from Deep, those boys, and a Walter, quite a few others that are still just there every single day, kind of doing the same thing that we do. And then when Matt sort of joined forces with MFB, we rebranded to FBI, and Matt bought a really strong contingent of just Dynasty fanatics. But I guess a lot of people would sort of know that, you sort of start off maybe with redraft, eventually you find your way to Dynasty, and then the real OG veterans are, sort of people that have been doing it for 20 years. They're sort of quite a lot of them orientate themselves towards Dynasty. They like that, being able to carry it over year to year. So I guess what I'm saying there is Matt bought in, a good, I can't even put a number on it, but it's probably over 100, maybe closer to 200 real veteran fantasy basketball players who have been around with Matt and Basketball Monster and on the Reddit boards and all that stuff for years and years and years and years. So they're sort of almost immediately was a real pedigree of really strong fantasy players. So we ended up creating something that was well organized, well-run leagues, sort of social, but almost more importantly, highly skilled community where you can come into our leagues and it's not going to be sort of some pushover. You're actually going to be challenged. And I think, once you get past that initial urge to just I want to win, you start to appreciate the competition itself and the process that's involved with winning. And I think that's sort of what unites the whole community even to this day. It's an appreciation for quality when it comes to fantasy basketball leagues.
Yeah, and so I mean that moves us on to the leagues themselves, and as you said, Dynasty was sort of, I guess, the core of what FBI is, as well as the draft only leagues, and now a number of just standard redraft leagues as well. I think, I mean, you run the leagues basically, at least the draft only ones, and Matt, you and Matt sort of share the Dynasty, and with, I mean, I don't have a lot to compare to, but I would assume that this year we had more draft only leagues than ever.
Yeah. So, I've sort of always run them sequentially and numbered them. Yeah. And, I keep the records. Obviously got to pay them out at the end of the season, but there's always that element of looking back and being like, well, who performed the best this year? So then I also got a pretty good idea of how many leagues we run. And it's just incrementally been getting more and more and more. So I think the first year was like 12 and then 20. And then this year, 75 so far. Yeah. I think we'll sort of probably push up to about 100 because I think I might just drop one more batch before we get into the redraft leagues. Yeah. But I will say on the Dynasty front that although I have 3 Dynasty leagues that I run, and I started those off actually before bringing sort of Matt. Before me and Matt sort of connected and agreed to sort of found FBI together, I sort of founded those 3 dynasties prior to that. But that's it. I tapped out at 3. Dynasties are like a massive effort to run, particularly, where there's like my 3 leagues, most of the rules are the same. It's 18 teams, 20 teams. All standard 9-cat leagues, all sort of a similar sort of roster and sort of fixture schedule, so on. Whereas what Matt's doing is like, I think it's like 40 Dynasty leagues, and then another probably 20 or 30 of the Draft Master Dynasty leagues, and then he'll have salary leagues, he'll have roto leagues. He's got in points league dynasties, head-to-head 9-cat, 8-cat. Some with massively deep rosters, some are 30-team leagues, some are 18, some are 20, some are 12. So it's sort of another level of difficulty again to have to manage so many leagues, but when they're all different, because when they're all the same, it's sort of like when I'm doing the redraft leagues, for instance, and I've got, maybe 30, 40 head-to-head leagues, 9-cat. It's a lot of the setup stuff that's sort of similar. So you can just sort of run through it and do the things that you need to do to set those up or to administer it through the season or set up the finals or whatever. There's sort of like certain similarity to what you have to do with every single one. So I can do that and listen to a podcast. Whereas with Matt, I think, switching from 9-cat 30-team league to a real salary 20-team league, bit more sort of focus required to be able to do that. So I'd definitely say Matt is the Dynasty guy. But yeah, DOs, I think we made that a thing. I don't like that. The draft only leagues really wasn't, I mean, there was no concept of draft only. You never even saw that term anywhere prior to when we started doing those $5 leagues with MFB and later FBI. And now it's like legit a thing, like you listen to it on podcasts, like obviously yours, but even others where it's casually mentioned, like, and people are doing draft only leagues and stuff like that. But, back a few years, like 5-10 years ago, that they were just like, they're just called mocks. There was never any money on the line with them. And they weren't what they are now. Let's put it that way. But the one league type that I haven't addressed here is just the standard leagues, which I think is probably, equally as popular as the other 2, if not the most popular. They are just well-run, standard one-season leagues, type of league that everyone is sort of familiar with. So we do I try and keep everything as standard as possible. I want to make it really accessible. Things I don't like are like weird categories. If it's 9-cat, it's traditional 9 categories. Like I sort of believe that it would be better if the 9th category was a hustle stat instead of a turnovers. It would make more sense. But in terms of what appeals to the most people, and if you fancy yourself like a good fantasy manager, you want to go head to head with other fantasy managers, you want to do it in a way that's like as standard as possible. So that's sort of how our leagues are set up. So you've got head-to-head is definitely the most popular. I would say like 70% is head-to-head. Almost all of them, all the leagues, whether head-to-head, I mean, let me finish that thought. 70% head-to-head, 25% roto, and maybe 5% points leagues. It's the least popular. Try and keep 9-cat for head-to-head, again, because it's popular. With roto, it's actually split. People like 9-cat and 8-cat. I've done 9-cat one year. I've done 8-cat another year. Always people complain. This year we're going to have both. And then there's always a few people asking for points leagues. So I put on a couple of those to appease those guys. And then similarly with like the setup, all of those leagues tend to be slow drafts because our, Fantasy Basketball International, our community is sort of really, truly representative from across the globe. Like it's basically every continent except Antarctica that we've got, regular members playing from. So you really just need to have slow drafts to sort of facilitate that. But again, sort of like the points league thing, there is like this sort of like a smaller contingent that really love auction drafts. So try to do a few of those every year. And actually that I think is like the premium way to do your draft is with an auction. So I actually quite often jump in those auction leagues myself. So yeah, I'll be trying to do a few more of those this year. And I think we got a good analyst one that we're cooking up too.
Yeah. I'm leaning more into auctions, but they are a little bit tougher because you can't. I mean, I can't imagine you can do a slow auction draft. I just don't know how that would work.
You can, but but it involves like having a shared spreadsheet, and then you've got like you're putting your bids on, and like if the time is 8 hours, like you need a good month for it. Like that's the thing about those. I didn't mention about the buy-ins. I think it's worth mentioning. The DOs are $5. The winner gets, I think it's $40. The second gets 20 or 45, 15. Every single one of them are like that. Dynasties are all different, but it's basically $20, $50. They tend to be the two buy-in amounts. But with the standard leagues, it's like 20, 50, 100, 500. And there's always there's some people that want an even bigger buy-in, 1,000 or more. So there'll definitely be one or two of those this year too.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the next thing, but just on those draft onlys, because mock drafts are a big thing, and I think the season for mock drafts is extending every year because of people like you and me who, as soon as fantasy's done, we want to start again. So there is more demand for those early draft only leagues, and the reason, we obviously get a good sample size with ADP, and we can pull some data pretty early, and I'm always fairly confident in our data because there is money on the line. Whereas you go into any of those mock drafts on Yahoo or Fantrax, you don't know who's drafting. People don't take it seriously. They might draft the first 2 rounds and then leave. So it's all auto drafted. So it is hard to get a good read on the ADP data from those sites early. I feel like once you get closer and closer to mid-September, October, the data probably sort of levels out and becomes a bit more accurate because people are actually caring about it. But I like our data for that.
Our data is pretty great, just like off the bat. You can actually literally be. So this is how it works for us. We go from regular season ends, then there's like a 2-week break, and during that 2-week break, you set up the playoff leagues. we got half a dozen playoff leagues last year, but we could have put on 20 and they would have all filled up. You know what I mean? So then you have the playoff leagues, the duration of the playoffs, and I'm starting the first draft only before the last playoff league has completed. So it's like basketball fantasy is, it's 365 days a year.
Yeah. And you'll hear like analysts will say, and Josh is a big one, it's far too early to be drafting. And completely fine, it is too early to be drafting. But for me, it's something to do. I just like doing it. But I don't know, I feel like it does prepare you because you're able to watch the trends. And like Wembanyama this season is a really good one. Very, very early. He was going in the 20s. Now he's down outside 30. You can just watch the trends quite closely and have a look at who's going where. So, really beneficial for me. Having a look at the analysts now. So as you've discussed it at length here, it was you and Matt for quite a while, running everything, doing everything. I came on board, I don't know, 12 months ago-ish, I think. And it was more just let's get, because while you were doing all the leagues, I guess the one thing you didn't have was content, or ongoing, consistent content. So I had a little bit of time. So we sort of had a chat, and I decided to come on and just help a little bit. Do a bit of freelance kind of stuff, obviously with a view to doing a podcast like this. It was probably a bit up and down to begin with, but I think we've sort of settled into a nice rhythm now with this show. We've just brought on Karan, who he's been doing some writing for us for 2 months, maybe 3 months now. Yeah. So he's stuff going up on his Swish Scribe, but also up on our website. And as we announced only a couple of days ago, Noah Rubin is coming over to join us with his Take Me Later podcast as well. So we're building slowly. We're still not sort of up there with some of those bigger sites that have multiple analysts and not endless amounts of money, but at least some money. So we're growing slowly. But I think for you, like filling out the content space and the podcast space, was that initially part of the plan, or is it just something that maybe has come about as sort of a natural turn of events?
I wouldn't say plan, but I guess it was pretty clear early on that like what we were creating had like the propensity for expansion in like numerous different ways. So, initially you bring people together so that you can have well-functioning leagues. And then that expands because you want to facilitate lots of different types of leagues. And, as more, because it's like, I remember being in the Slack channel, right? And we're at like 65 members, right? And then it's ticking up to 66 and 67. And then you get to 100 and it's like everyone's sort of, wow, we're at 100, right? Yeah. And then, same thing when it got to 1,000, like that ticker, it never really stops going up. You know what I mean? Like it keeps going up. And then as more and more people come in, it's like, well, what now? And, we in the Slack channel, everything's going well, season or two in there and everyone's feeling comfortable. Boom, we hit the limit to how many messages we can send in a free Slack server. Yeah. And they start asking us like, $6.95 per person per month. It's like, okay, well, not going to be able to fund that. Try and like apply to Slack to give us a bit of breathing room, and they won't do that. So it's like, okay, well, we're sort of forced here to go and see how we can facilitate this expansion further. All right, Discord. So go over to Discord. Oh, this is interesting. Can do a lot of different stuff there. And then I end up like getting balls deep into Discord. How do you program it at the back end? What are all the things that you can do? Blah, 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 blah. And then, as you're doing that, you're like, well, you're just sort of discovering like, well, this would fit in nicely here. That would fit in nicely there. So I guess it's like, it wasn't planned, but it didn't just come about either. It was sort of like, there's demand for like people like this community. There's demand for it. We're liking doing what we're doing. Like, how can we add more stuff that's going to just make it a better place for people? And then the other thing I would say is like when it comes to you, for instance, it's not like you were saying like, just so happened that you weren't doing so much stuff like at that point in time. That's true. But I met you, I don't know, 5 years before that.
Yeah.
10 years before that. Just like, through community. I remember talking to you and you're like, yeah, I think I think I might have a crack at becoming an analyst. And then you went on to have like a storied career. But I mean, I remember talking to you before you had any sort of pedigree as an analyst. Obviously met you in Melbourne. We met up with Josh another time. I think you and I met up together before we met Josh. So like we hung out for a couple of hours before then. So I think we sort of like built up a friendship. Obviously we're both Aussies, which which helps with that like initial ice break.
Yeah.
We're awake at the same times as well. So it's like same there. It's like, I guess you weren't necessarily picturing yourself ending up here, when we met 5 years ago, although I think I propositioned you about it at the time.
Possibly. It's a long time ago.
But then, just like situational stuff happens and then here we are. And look, I mean, personally, I think you've made a really massive contribution to FBI. I love listening to your podcast. Like I obviously listen to a variety of Dynasty podcasts, but I think the one that you do is like one of the best. And like to be platforming you through FBI and have you as the lead analyst, I just think it's a match made in heaven. And I guess the other thing is like we can build out the community and the platform and the offering, in a way that we want to do it. And I guess it's not really commercially orientated. I think that's something that's really a fundamental thing. Like we're not shilling subscriptions and trying to turn a profit and pay out shareholders or whatever. Like, number one, we don't make any money at all. But number two, if there is some sort of revenue, we get something from YouTube or whatever, like that's just going to go straight back into, the platform that we're creating. Yeah. So, like whatever we can do to just make FBI like a better place, I guess we share those values. So I think that's really the most fundamental thing about like how the stars aligned for us is like we share the same values. We have very sort of a complementary vision of what we'd like to sort of be investing our time to create. And then Matt's in that same vein. And then to your point, we brought on sort of Karan. He's doing written content at the moment, but we see big things in his future. He shares that philosophy. And Noah, same thing. He seems to share that philosophy too. And wants to sort of help, create a space that we can all sort of be fantasy degens together in a really pleasurable way.
Yeah, and that's for me. It's the flexibility. Like we're all free to just do what we want. If we've got an idea, let's roll it out. Let's try it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, then okay, we gave it a crack. So no, look, I like it, and as you said, it is continuously growing because I don't remember exactly, but when I first started, which was 12-ish months ago, maybe a bit more, I feel like the Discord was at about 1,500 maybe. I reckon. And we're now almost bang on 3,000. So it's doubled in 12, 14 months.
And it's sort of been like that every year almost.
Yeah.
And actually, we haven't really started the doubling for this year yet, right? Because we're at 2.96, but you started 12 months ago. Most of that growth happened September, October last year.
Yeah.
And then we're about to see things, probably be at 3,500, 4,000 by the time the season starts. Yeah. And that's just like the Discord server. Something that I've realized is actually the reach is broader than just that number in the server. So,
oh yeah, of course,
account for like the Twitter followings and YouTube and some of the other channels. So it's probably a bit broader than just the 3K.
Yeah. So obviously there's my show, this show, the Balls Deep show, which is the first, I guess, consistent show that we've had. Matt is about to relaunch, I suppose. He did a couple episodes of Dynasty a few months ago. and is now in a position to be able to start doing that more regularly. So I think he's hoping to do it fairly consistently starting next week. And then we have Noah coming across, and Noah has been doing a consistent product for the last, I think he's up to 20 odd shows. So that's 6 months. He's been doing his shows. So Matt will be doing the Dynasty. I'm doing just Redraft. And Noah is our sort of guy in the middle that he'll adjust his content based on where we are in the season. So now we're sort of heading into Redraft. So there'll probably be a bit of a focus on Redraft. Come sort of towards the back end of the season when Redraft starts to die down, he might lean into Dynasty a little bit more. And look, I mean, there's view to potentially have more shows at some point, but I think we're pretty happy with our numbers and subscriptions and everything, the way we're scaling up at the moment. So, improving our content, certainly.
We're going to have 3 shows. I mean, minimum 3 shows a week. I mean, you often do 2, so it could be almost 4 shows a week. And I think the milestone that we're tracking towards is just like 1 a day.
Yeah.
So you wake up in the morning, there's an FBI show there. It's quality content, something you want to listen to. And I think with that scale, there does come opportunity, right? So like, if we get a sponsor that wants to come in, then that's going to allow us to, offer better prizes. We had Fantrax sponsor the last couple of World Cups, and they offered a signed NBA jersey to the winner of those tournaments. So, the scale definitely brings opportunity. But having said that, it's not a matter of just publishing anything you can to achieve scale. It has to be worthwhile, has to be of a quality.
Yeah.
And, that's why, you look at a Quran, he showed us for a period of time, like his sort of dedication and the quality of what he was producing. So, he starts writing articles, show them to me, show them to you. Yeah, they're pretty good, but can you keep crunching them out? I know that, 10, 15 years ago, I thought, oh, I could write articles, and I wrote 3, and then I sort of moved on from writing the articles.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a ridiculous tendency to write ridiculously long articles. So, 4,000 words, which not like reading. Too long. Too many words. But so I wasn't able to sort of maintain article writing consistently. Karan's done a good job over an extended period of time. We obviously talked to him. We talked to him on the phone, talked to him on video calls, very personable, and we're excited for him to start sort of featuring on FBI podcasts and so on this season. And then Noah, the same thing, he's sort of proven himself quite, adequately, doesn't cut it. He's beyond proven himself with the production of his Thank Me Later podcast. And, that's just exactly the type of creator that we want here at FBI. So excited to have him on board too.
Yeah, and I think for anyone that is maybe new to FBI and sort of have a look through and see what we've been doing the last 3 months, 4 months, since we've had a consistent show and some content, I would look at what we've been doing as the bare minimum, because this time of year you are almost scrapping for content. There isn't a lot happening. So as you said, the vision is to have a show per day eventually. And I'll certainly be doing probably 2 shows at least per week. I've already been on the horn with a few people. It's got some good guests and all sorts of things in the works. So I think it's going to be exciting season. Moving on to, we're almost sort of jumping out of here, but just quickly touching on the World Cup. You have talked about it a little bit with some of the sponsors, and this year it's definitely a lot bigger than it has been. We've partnered with Josh and Locked On Fantasy Basketball to sort of co-facilitate or co-promote this World Cup. Do you want to just give, for people that don't know what it is? I mean, we have pushed it a little bit on Twitter, as has Josh, and on our shows respectively. But for those that aren't necessarily aware of what it is and how it works, do you want to just give a quick sort of spiel on that?
Yeah, I've got some slides here, but probably not going to be able to whack them up on the screen while I'm talking to you. So I'll just sort of run through it. All right, where to start? All right, I'll just sort of give an overview of the structure. Yeah, to your point, each year the World Cup has taken place, it's sort of grown bigger and bigger. Initially, it was designed to accommodate for all the people that were existing in our server, so we could all compete against each other to find out, like, okay, well, you know, who's quote unquote the best this season. But you know, it's obviously grown in popularity quite considerably, and you know, like something that was very eye-opening and gratifying to me was like, you know, scrolling through Reddit, you know, reading some of the fantasy basketball stuff, and people are talking about the World Cup on Reddit, and you're like, wow, you know, this is definitely like attractive to people. So it's scaled up every year. This year we've gone to 48 divisions, which is actually almost double what we did last year. So 576 teams. But having said that, for anyone that competed in last year's World Cup, we were at about 300 and something teams for that. And it was too slow. Like the, you know, fan tracks, as good as it is, it just couldn't handle having so many divisions and so many teams. So you have things like, all right, you're trying to just load up the standings page and you're waiting for 5 minutes for the page to load up. I didn't feel that was a good experience. So whilst I've expanded it to 576 teams this season, I've taken a couple of different measures to sort of make sure that those performance issues aren't with us this year. And so far it seems so good. I think I nailed it. So I think we're going to have a very, very smooth experience this year. But anyway, 576 teams. How do you reduce those down to one? So the first thing we do is we've got 48 divisions, 12 teams per division, and you basically just play that out like a normal league. So you play each team once, so 11 matchups, and then I think that's supremely fair because, you know, the completely balanced schedule. Normally in fantasy leagues, you're playing some teams twice and some teams once. And okay, you could draw all the good teams for your, you know, the teams that you're playing twice, and then someone else draws all the bad teams. They make it into the finals, you don't. So 11 rounds, play every team once. And then it's, top 8 make it in, bottom 4 are eliminated, it's knockout. And then what that means is after 3 weeks of playoffs, you get down to one division winner. So every one of those division winners gets $100. And given that your entry fee was 20, you sort of already won at that point. And then if you come second, you're going to get a prize of $25. This is at the division level, right? So even if you come second, you're basically getting your money back plus $5. No, you don't lose anything. But then after we finish phase 1, which is like 14 weeks, we jump into phase 2. So we take a week off, and those 48 managers get split into 4 divisions, so 4 divisions of 12. So it's very important to me to keep the divisions at 12, right? Because different ways to boil it down. Like in the past, we had like a Royal Rumble round where all the division winners kept their same team and they all played each other at the end. And then whoever had the highest sort of amount of points was the winner. I don't really think there's like the skill that we're trying to promote in that setup. It's just sort of, okay, if you've got a good team, you've got a better chance of winning, but it's sort of like a crapshoot. You can't adjust your rosters during the week to try and just like finesse that win, try and get your percentages just over the line or whatever. So important to have those divisions of 12 so that the teams are sort of like the same construct, the same depth, and so on. So anyway, we take a week off. The 48 division winners are split into 4 different leagues. They draft again, and then it's knockout for 2 rounds. And then that brings it down to 3 teams per the 4 So you had 48 teams that made it through, split into 4 groups of 12. Those 4 groups of 12 become 4 groups of 3, which again equals 12 teams. So then if you make it through to the third phase, which is you just don't get eliminated for 2 rounds, draft again, just with the 12 teams. And then we go into knockout. The top 4 seeds, they make it through to the second round automatically. And I should say that if you make it through to phase 3, I think you get another prize, which is, what is it? It's another $60, right? So those 12 people that make it through phase 2 get $60 each. And then you're left with 12 teams in phase 3. The top 4 seeds, so they're the ones with the highest win-loss record through the first phase, they automatically go through to the second round, but then it's knockout. So 8 teams become 4. They match up against the 4 that made it through automatically. That becomes 4 teams, and then that becomes a 2-team playoff. That takes us right up to the end of the season. It does sort of nudge April. Doesn't quite get there, but it sort of nudges April. But then you're left with one champion. They get $3,200, and then second overall gets $1,600. And then we're also just still in the process of sourcing some extra goodies for people that made it in the World Cup. In the past, sort of used the signed NBA jersey as an incentive to get people to come and want to play. But now the fact is, like, even though it's the biggest World Cup we've done with 576 teams, there's way more demand for it than we can satisfy, right? It's like, I mean, I've got a list of over 1,200 people that have registered, right? So not everyone can get in at the moment. Next year, I'm probably going to go to, 1,152 teams or something, so it'll probably be even bigger again with bigger prize pool and whatever. But the point I'm making is we'll throw some more goodies in there for the people that win. But there's no need to sort of have those announced up front. They'll just be like, the cherry on the cake. And then one more point I'll make about the World Cup. I found this year is a bit arbitrary, like who gets in and who doesn't. As you said, we teamed up with Josh to do the World Cup this year. So Josh gave out half the invitations. We're giving out half the invitations. But Josh will do his show, and it's like, okay, well, who listened to his show? Who answered the questions in the form? Who got the questions right? Does that make you a good fantasy basketball manager? Maybe, but not necessarily. You know what I mean? So, and it's the same, like we're giving out invitations to the World Cup on the podcast, on Twitter, in the Discord server, but it's not necessarily going to the strongest fantasy managers. It's the ones that were lucky enough to win the invite. So I think that's something that I'd like to adjust next season. And the number one way that I'm going to do that is if you win a standard league, so we'll have probably 50 standard leagues, 60 standard leagues. I think that's going to be like if you win or come second in any of our head-to-head roto or points leagues, not talking about the dynasty ones, just the regular leagues, then you're in the World Cup. Like you get an automatic invite if you want to take it up. So, and then the other thing I might do as well is like we did 75 or maybe it's 100 draft-only leagues this year. So I don't see why the winners of all of those draft-only leagues also wouldn't be getting like an automatic invite, because at the end of the day, you want the best of the best competing in the best tournament in the world. And, and it's designed to get like the best fantasy player in the world. That's why all the categories are standard, the format's standard, the roster depth's standard. Like it's not the best person that can read some like sort of like a set of rules and then like apply their fantasy skills to that particular set of rules. It has to be like the most standard and most even playing field with the best managers. And that's how we find who the winner is. So hopefully all that made sense.
Yeah, look, it did to me, but I knew what you were talking about. But yes, no, I think it did. And for me, I think, I guess maybe some kickback here would be, well, this is going too deep. Like the league is going close to the end of the season, and that's when it's not a good time to be playing fantasy. The difference, I think, for us is that you're redrafting. So you're not going with the team you drafted in September. In March, you can draft at the start of March based on what we're seeing. So, I mean, you don't want injuries to players, but like, I don't know, Embiid might go out in February And
Yeah.
so you've had him all season. He's been good for you. He's got you to where you need to go. You can then redraft. If he's out, he doesn't get drafted. And you might go, look, we can see that the Spurs are starting to rest Wemby. They're starting to rest Devin Vassell. So you might draft Wemby, but it might be at pick 80 because he's only going to play half the games over the last month. So there is some adjustment that can be made, which I think is a strategy in itself, like knowing and reading the league and having a look at trends and understanding what teams are doing is all going to come into that last portion of the league, which I think is going to make it really interesting.
Yeah, and like the draft is such an important part of your whole season, right? Like, if you have a bad week in a matchup with someone, doesn't make or break your season. But if you fuck your draft up, you're done. So like drafting is such an important fantasy basketball skill. So having multiple drafts throughout the season, I think it favors the most skillful fantasy basketball players, and it also makes the entirety of the season more interesting as well, because you get to do the thing you love like 3 times instead of one.
That's right.
But no, I think that element is like, it obviously sets us apart from any other tournament that's cropped up in recent years, and I think it will continue to set us apart until inevitably it's introduced in other spaces aside from ours. But I just view that as a compliment, So and we'll be obviously innovating and making this better and better and better. So by the time others catch up with us, we'll be steps ahead by that point.
Yeah, and I think we talk about, everyone talks about it. I mean, Josh talks about it a lot. Is that the fantasy season it's almost getting shorter because we're having to end seasons slightly earlier every year because we know teams are going to start tanking and resting. By implementing this, it allows you to stretch out your season. So if you're lucky enough to get to that point and win your way through, it does mean you get an extra month or 6 weeks of competitive fantasy basketball, which, I mean, that's a win in itself, I think. All right. Well, I think I've kept you long enough. A quick chat about FBI turns into a 50-minute podcast, but there's a lot to say. Obviously, we've got. I mean, normally I'd ask the person that I'm chatting with what's coming up. We've already outlined what's coming up, so
I can say one thing on that, which is I've sent out half the invitations for the World Cup, and then I've got another quarter that are ready to go, and I've got another quarter that still needs to be filled. So the people that have qualified already that haven't received their invitations, they'll get those this week. And then we will fill up the remainder of the World Cup probably across the weekend or early next week and get those invitations out. And I would say it'll be next week, could even be late this week, but could even be just before the weekend, but definitely, if not next week, the standard leagues will be going up. Yeah. So it'll be head-to-head, 9-cat, $20 and $50, $100 leagues, jump into those. It will be roto leagues, 8-cat and 9-cat. There'll be an auction. There'll be a high buy-in league. So watch out for those. Jump in as quick as you can. I keep releasing them. I keep dropping more and more leagues all the way up until maybe 2 weeks before the season begins. So in this year, it's going to be like 7th or 8th of October. But by the time we get there, they're done. And then also when you get sort of to the end of that period, which we're just coming into now, you just don't get your choice of what you want, right? You might want to, people coming like, I really wanted to be in a $100 head-to-head 9-cat league. It's like, wow, we got a 20 and a 50 here, but the 100 one's full. I don't know if I've got demand to do another $100 league. So get in early, and then don't be disappointed. Get the ones you want, and come and play against what I think will be the stiffest competition that you can play against. Like if your aim is just to win the league and win the money and you don't care about sort of like the enjoyment and the challenge throughout the season, I think you can go and pick up, fantasy leagues in various different places where you're not going to get that quality. But if you want to really have a sort of a challenge and put yourself in a position where you're really going to enjoy the entirety of the season, and you're going to come out if you win knowing that you really earned it, then come and jump into our leagues, because they are made up of the best managers in the world. Pretty sure about that.
Yeah. And we'll drop in the comments. We can put a link to Discord for those that aren't. I mean, we both have it in our profile, I think, on Twitter.
Yeah, check out at Adam King 91, at Hidden Upside, at NBA Dynasty ADP. I'm pretty sure there's a Discord link in all the bios. Yep. FBIbasketball.com definitely has it. So yeah, it's not hard to find your way in if you want to come and find your way in.
No, and so we can pop that in the comments as well, just for in case, I don't know, maybe you're not on Twitter. But and we might put in a link for more entries to the World Cup. Like, if people are watching this, can they click through to that form? Are we doing that, or have you got enough?
Yeah. Like, let's what I'll do is we'll drop a form in here, and we'll make like a dozen entries guaranteed to people that have tuned into this podcast and completed the form. I think I should be doing the last batch of ducks on Friday. So I've got ducks to do from your last two podcasts. Then there's this podcast, and then there's a form currently as well in the World Cup info channel. There's a form, some duck emojis. Jump in there, because I'm going to fill the league from that form. So we'll get the ones in from your podcast, from this podcast, and then there's probably going to be a couple, like 100, 150 spots left, I think, which, boom, we'll just smash out the ducks from there. So, yeah.
All right. So, look, plenty of ways to get in. Jump into Discord, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, obviously. That would be amazing. I will let Bdub go. Thanks for making some time during your school holidays to come on and talk, have a bit of a break from the kids and a bit of quiet time.
It was a pleasure. Had a sneaky beer while we were doing it.
Oh, sneaky beer, even better. I'm about to head off and have a couple of those. That will do it for today's show. Remember, check out all of our content, as we said, at FBIbasketball.com and on our Discord server. Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, catch up.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at FBIbasketball.com.